When we looked at them 4 days later, the cells had become 2 to 3 times larger and were creating colony forming units, meaning they were beginning to replicate and expand themselves. Actually, beyond Eureka to an OMFG moment.
And so you're finding essentially a 3-year reversal with a single treatment. And that's phenomenal because if you think of just keeping the body aging at the typical biological pace matched with chronological pace, that's a feat in and of itself. But to actually start turning back the clock, it requires a whole different set of tools and strategies.
When the cells are activated and we give them intravenously, during that process, we play the same piano music, so the cells re-enter the body in the same vibrational musical environment where they were awakened from their lifelong slumber. At age 73, he was still a triathlete, and I think he's competed in 42 triathlons. And unlike most people, his biologic age was already 6 years younger than his birth date age. And he did 3 treatments, and over a year, he went from -6 to -18. He was literally 18 years younger biologically.
Hello and welcome everybody to Unreasonable Health, and I'm your host, Regan Archibald. Today, I've got Dr. Todd Ovokaitys. He's a highly accomplished medical doctor, author, researcher with a specialization in regenerative medicine. He's got groundbreaking work in state-of-the-art invention of the Strachan-Ovokaitys node generator, or SONG laser technology. We're going to be talking about VSELs today because he's one of the doctors that actually figured out how to activate these small little vesicles, these stem cells that can help you reverse your age and regenerate from so many different conditions. So Dr. Todd is also evidence. He's published 5 recent medical publications. He's greatly advanced the field of regenerative medicine. Many of you know several of my friends work with Dr. Todd Ovokaitys, and I had a chance to sit down and talk to him in Phoenix at the Da Vinci 50 conference and asked Todd to come and talk to me on the Unreasonable Health podcast. And so here he is today. Dr. Todd also skillfully integrates the latest advancements with traditional medical practices and showcases a multidisciplinary perspective. And it's evident through his contributions to music and dance, and his visionary outlook and expertise make him a true pioneer and a highly respected figure in the scientific community. And he's someone I've wanted to talk to for a long time. And so give it up for Dr. Todd Ovokaitys. Todd, great to have you here.
Great to be on with you. Such a pleasure.
So you've done some incredible work, and one of the things that was your eureka moment, we'll just kind of dive right into the V cells, because a lot of researchers and doctors and scientists have tried to wake up these little quiescent stem cells, but you figured out the magical equation. But maybe you could kind of walk us through that and talk to us about your journey of getting to the state that you're at right now in stem cells and regenerative medicine.
Yeah, happy to. There were really 2 eureka moments that stacked on each other. The first eureka moment was we had our first SONG laser, which is driven by a laser as a light source, and the art of it is creating a new type of waveform that does new things, particularly greater depth of penetration, and that allows us to do things biologically with lasers that haven't been possible before. We knew we had a new type of laser energy with different configuration and different properties, and we didn't know if it would do anything. So our first experiment was with a colleague of mine at the NIH, where she gave me 5 flasks of cells of a stem cell-like cell from the bone marrow, and we just passed this beam through each of the flasks along the long axis of the medium, put them in the incubator, and we just wanted to see if it would do anything. And one day later, in every single flask, the cells had aligned where the beam had been. You could literally see a visible string of cells with the naked eye. What that gave us was a unique way to enhance the localization of cells, and that was Eureka 1. And because it was successful, we then got the resources to build the next generation of technology and take it to where we have today. If we hadn't seen that result, we might not be talking today. So that was one.
That's awesome. What's Eureka 2?
Eureka 2 has to do with the V cells.
Yeah.
And the V cells are extraordinary. I became aware of them in a 600-page textbook written by a Dr. Radachak from the University of Louisville in Kentucky, who's been the main pioneer in the basic science of the V cells. And in his chapter on cord blood, I learned that there is an incredible cocktail of different types of cells in fresh cord blood: neural stem cells and mesenchymal stem cells and cardiac stem cells and pancreas stem cells. Yet the type of cell that most intrigued and inspired him was the V cell. And the long phrase is VSEL, very small embryonic-like stem cell. And what so compelled him was the fact that they're pluripotent. Different types of stem cells are good at regenerating certain tissues based on the type of stem cell that it is. And being pluripotent means that it can generate any of the three primary germ layers: endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. And basically, all the different types of cells derive from those. So a pluripotent stem cell can make any type of cell depending upon the environment that it finds itself in. So that was a type of cell that was fascinating. And the Eureka moment was the first time that a fellow scientist was able to provide us little micro wells, the things you use to study cells and culture when you apply different interventions to them to see how they respond. So we had these little wells with pure preparations of V cells, and we did short applications of the song laser to each of the wells. Before the stimulation, they're really very small. They're only 1 to 2 microns. They're roughly the size of a bare nucleus with a little bit of cytoplasm. When we looked at them 4 days later, the cells had become 2 to 3 times larger and were creating colony forming units, meaning they were beginning to replicate and expand themselves. And that was actually beyond Eureka to an OMFG moment.
Yeah, that's a big deal because for those of you, I know it's a little bit of a technical conversation, but to be able to have a CFU assay or colonizing forming, that means you can essentially start regenerating tissues, and pretty much if it's pluripotent, you can choose a tissue. If you have a kidney that's damaged and needs regenerating, you could regenerate kidneys, brains, cartilage. I mean, all kinds of things. So, and so that's a huge breakthrough. And so you filed patents on this. I think you've got a few patents on it, if I remember our conversation correctly.
3 granted US and global patents, yes.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of work just to get the patents. You've got to, there's a lot of evidence that has to be shown, and you've got to prove your theory. And so let's talk about some of the application of this because, you treat people similar to the way I do is people want to become younger. They want to extend their health span and their lifespan. And so what are some of the biggest applications you've seen with these V cells, and what skills do you have now that you didn't have before the invention or discovery? I guess we could call it a discovery more than an invention.
Right. The area that we really focused on is this whole question of biological age. And I had the pleasure of being at an event where I spoke in Boston in the same event as Dr. Church, the developer of CRISPR, and made a really interesting statement, which is anti-aging is boring. If you do a lot of work and do all the right stuff, it's like slowing down the downhill slide, and it's useful to be healthier at one age than it would otherwise be if you do all that work. But what was really exciting to him was actual age reversal. And the eureka moment number 3, if you want to call it that, was when we had access to the most accurate clock for biological aging that exists, which is the epigenetic DNA methylation biological aging clock. And sorry, everyone, that's quite a mouthful. Let me describe that a little bit. There are 2 main aging clocks that we talk about. One is telomeres, which is the ends of the chromosomes. And as cells divide, the telomeres shorten, and it's likened to the plastic bits on shoelaces. When they come off, the shoelaces tend to deteriorate quickly. And a lot of people have focused on the clock, and there are products that have been shown to elongate telomeres. Yet, according to the inventor of the clock, Dr. Stephen Horvath, who I also had an occasion to speak with, he said that telomere clock is only 14% accurate. And the first clock of this type is the Horvath clock, and it's very accurate compared to telomeres for biological age. And there have been other derivative clocks, and some companies measure this in various ways. The first testing that we did was before we actually had the testing. So we didn't have pre and post, we just had what was the result of people having had treatments before. And what was relevant is if that someone had had a treatment anytime in the past 5 years, we saw that they were usually about 3 years younger biologically than they were at the baseline test. That was already exciting. And even more interesting was if they had 2 tests, they were treatments, they were 6 years younger. And if they had 4 treatments, they were 12 years younger. So we're seeing this incredible, nearly linear curve of an additive benefit for literally shifting the biologic age back and back and back. Then we started to do pre and post testing, and the results were similar. We found that if someone hadn't had one of these treatments, they were usually as old or older than their chronological age biologically. And with these treatments, we were seeing what was usually about a 3-year biological age reversal. And if they did more treatments, that effect continued at roughly the same level. The only thing we found that inhibits that effect significantly and consistently is corticosteroids. And it was first observed with a mixed martial artist fighter who was getting lots of corticosteroid injections in his joint. And we didn't see the age reversal effect that we were looking for. And we also found that if persons were under great stress, where they're boosting their own intrinsic cortisol levels, or internally produced corticosteroids, that it was also inhibiting the effect. And we had someone who wasn't stressed and they got great results, and they were really stressed, and they didn't get the same kind of results. There could be other things that interfere with it, but that's what we've observed so far. So the most exciting discovery in the bigger picture is for the first time to have a tool that can reverse biological age at the DNA level. And what's interesting is that people's performance from a physiologic state, from exercise performance, tends to improve to match the new biological age.
Wow. And so you're finding essentially a 3-year reversal with a single treatment, and then it continues on through some of the testing, and that's phenomenal, because if you think of just keeping the body aging at the typical biological pace matched with chronological pace with the world that we live in, that's a feat in and of itself. But to actually start turning back the clock it requires a whole different set of tools and strategies. And so what have you found? I mean, the steroidal injections, why do you think that stops some of the progression of the age reversal properties of the treatment?
Excellent question. One of the basic science factors that I learned is that depending upon the microchemical environment in which you incubate V cells, you can drive their differentiation in one direction or another. With one set of conditions, you can make neural stem cells or cartilage stem cells or pancreas stem cells. And one of the agents that was used to drive differentiation was glucocorticoids. So the effect might just be it prematurely causes them to differentiate, doesn't allow them to internally expand and become the tissue we ideally want it to become.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I have seen a study out of Harvard where they actually found that stem cells would become more selective as far as turning into cartilage cells, those progenitor cells, in the presence of corticosteroids. So that is fascinating. But what you're saying is they would differentiate too quickly. Therefore, the stem cells couldn't really assess the environment that they were going into to determine which lineage they should start taking on.
And in particular, may limit the internal expansion before they commit to ultimate differentiation.
Yeah, got it. Wow. And what have you seen on the lifestyle side? Have you seen certain dietary things that influence it? Have you found that there's different substances like peptides that can be helpful? What have you noticed on that side of things?
That's an excellent point, and something that we really believe in and focus on. I've actually even trademarked the phrase, the biohack is the stack. So,
Cool.
right, it's not just one thing.
Yep.
Even if you have one modality that can create the benefit of making the body younger, there are many more things that can be done. And we love peptide therapy. We use a lot of it. And as you know, there are many different types of peptides that target the enhanced regeneration and function of different systems. So we often stack with peptides. We also have done a lot of work with nutraceuticals. I have a laser enhanced nutraceutical company that has 30 formulas. We've done clinical studies on a dozen of them that in their own right can support the regeneration, as we say, support the healthy structure and function of tissues, which we give to everyone, and then we decide what other adjuncts can be used. There's pulse EMF therapy and red light therapy and HBOT and EBOO and biocharger and a lot of other modalities more from the technical side. And we also are strong in recommending yoga, meditation, exercise programs. We haven't focused as much on diet because people are very all over the board with that. Although I think in general, there are some go-tos. Personally, I like what I would call paleo wildatarian intermittent fasting. That works well for people that are so disposed to have animal products. I'm O positive, and so they say that O positive people do better with that. Some people do better with vegetarianism. I think there is some importance, even in the dietary side, of optimizing diet in terms of the types of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and the way people structure it, particularly avoiding excessive carbohydrate, which generally makes any program not work as well.
Sure. Well, you and I are both O positive, universal donors right here.
That's right.
That's great. And so the other thing I think is super fascinating is I've heard you actually, like with music, you're a musician, and so you have this art that you bring into your V cells. And is it true that you sing or you play music to your B cells?
It's totally true. It's part of our protocol.
That's beautiful. So tell me about that if you don't mind. I'm very fascinated.
Mhm. There are two types of music that we play, and inspired by an energy initiation from my grand master a couple of years ago, I awoke 3 days later hearing this angelic choir. And when that was complete, I heard a full piano section start to finish. Then I heard violins start to finish, then other instruments layered one on top of another. And a few months later, I got together with musicians in a professional studio and created a piece that I call the New Life Energy Symphony. The musical track that was the basis for layering all the other instruments was the pure piano piece, which is more simple and elegant in its own right vibrationally. So during the process where we awaken the cells with the laser, they're awakened to the pure piano piece. And we've actually studied the piece using heart rate variability and have found in a number of tests that it significantly increases HRV, which suggests it's turning off the stress response and turning on the rest and regenerate response. When the cells are activated and we give them intravenously, during that process, we play the same piano music so the cells re-enter the body in the same vibrational musical environment where they are awakened from their lifelong slumber. Once all the cells are in, then we play the full symphony as a celebration and ceremony. The other type of music is what I call Lemurian choirs. And there's a long backstory to why I would be composing and producing choirs with as many as 900 singers from 60 countries. This is based on an ancient system of tones and tonal patterns that are designed to regenerate the body and expand awareness and consciousness as well. And there are some pieces from those choirs that we then play, which have other effects, not just for reducing stress, but enhancing the awareness state. And the music plays through the end of the treatment. Once the cells are in, then we have what we call the laser guidance process, where depending upon their priorities, we use the same song laser that can go deep through tissue. And that we say, based on our research and what we've patented, increases the probability that a stem cell goes in the three-dimensional volume of tissue where the person can most use it. So we define priorities, have a laser guidance protocol, and while that's happening, there is musical vibration supporting the process.
That is awesome. So, and it was your grandmaster in what arena?
The system is called New Life Energy,
Okay.
and it has an unbroken lineage of grandmasters going back 5,000 years to Lao Tzu in China.
No way. How cool.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So are you a grandmaster or will you be?
I'm not yet, but I'm working on it.
That is great. And so there's a lot of Taoist principles, obviously, are intertwined in the training,
Mm-hmm.
and then and music is in there as well. It sounds like.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a series of practices. Some of it is meditations, there are physical practices, there are energy practices, and then there are more intentional practices. And it's not unique to the system, but the one thing I found particularly powerful was the simple act of writing down your goals for the day for 5 minutes. And then the other part, which isn't emphasized as much, spending time to write down your wins, synchronicities, and moments of reverential awe for that day.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I think we could all benefit from that.
Mhm.
And What's an example of a reverential offering?
A reverential awe, which means that something is so beautiful, it can bring you to tears, like you see a scene
Ah,
in nature. Um, People have had that experience even with the music, where it just moves them, and they may be in tears just because it's beautiful. It's not about sadness; it's just being inspired, whether it's a piece of music, a work of art, a scene in nature, or some beautiful thing a person has done for another that just catches your breath because it's so magnificent in the beauty you experience from it.
man, there's very few humans who appreciate the art as much as they do the science. Who I've met in my walk. You're one of those individuals that you can swim in both sides of the pool, which is really fascinating. How did you how did you what's your origin? Like how did you get into both the art and the science of life?
The art actually started in an official way when I was in medical school. I was at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and they have an institute called Peabody, which is Baltimore's version of Juilliard, and they offered some very large discounts if I wanted to take classes at Peabody as a student at Johns Hopkins. And I took both voice and classical guitar lessons there
During medical school
during
with
medical
all
school.
with all your spare time.
Yeah, exactly.
And you were no slacker of a student. I've heard you graduated top of your class and in pretty much any academic pursuit you've taken on.
I've done well academically, yes.
That is brilliant. And so you how many instruments do you play right now?
Oh, mostly classical guitar and some piano.
Okay, man. And do you find that as fascinating as science, or do you kind of how do you split up your time?
Well, the science takes a lot more time, and the music is also what I do with creating tones and tonal patterns with the voice. I've actually done a lot more work in that area. There is a system called the pineal tones, which is particularly designed to create resonance with the pineal, which you know has profound importance for many things. And in that arena, I've composed and produced 11 choirs on different sacred sites of the planet, with choirs as large as over 900, which was the first choir on the island of Maui on the date of the end of the Mayan calendar, December 12th, 2012. And on December 12th, 2024, we will have our 12th choir of 12 returning to the island of Maui.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. How was that? How did you assemble 900 people?
Through a set of teachings, I'm good friends with an author named Lee Carroll, and this maybe steps me out on a limb a little bit. He is an intuitive that brings through information that he describes as a magnetic master named Cryon, and he has a large following. And my actual inspiration to create these tones and tone patterns was from the channelings of Cryon. There was a particular set of information that inspired me to look for tones and tone patterns that would communicate with DNA in a certain powerful way. And that gave rise to the first level, and then the second and third and fourth occurred. For the choir in Maui, there are actually 24 different tone patterns that are put together in pairs. the information was the individual tones are powerful and each have an intention, and they're way more powerful if they're put together in pairs and large groups of people sing them. So it was mostly through his large network of people interested in his work that the word was out that these could be learned. And I did trainings all around the world. I think at last count, around 11,000 people have been trained to this method. And then they're invited to come to the choirs where they get a playlist that they can rehearse. And we spend a couple days with professional co-conductors, get everybody tuned up, and then we have a big performance.
Wow, how cool is that? And so now what you've done is you've brought the music into the VSELs. So anytime you treat somebody, there's music that's applied to the treatment. Is that how it works?
Yes, it's the recommended protocol.
That is great. And you've trained a lot of doctors, several of them my friends in this technique. And so yeah, your work is just it's been very life-changing for so many people. Maybe you could tell us a couple of experiences that you've had either personally or with some of your patients where you've seen some big transformations.
Mhm. One of the funnest cases is a colleague of mine, and he's given me permission to talk about this. And I usually don't give ages because I think we need to overcome our global thought form that based on a number, the body's supposed to do certain things. One of our goals is to make biologic age the relevant factor and chronologic age less and less relevant. That said, at age 73, he was still a triathlete, and I think he's competed in 42 triathlons. And unlike most people, his biologic age was already 6 years younger than his birth date age. And he did 3 treatments, and over a year, he went from -6 to -18. He was
Wow.
literally 18 years younger biologically than his birth date age. And then, very interestingly, he did a treatment where he directed the cells to his heart, not for a cardiac issue, but to see if it would increase his performance. 3 weeks after that, in competition, his maximum heart rate went from 173 to 185, which is basically cardiac physiology being 12 years younger. And doing the math on that, that was roughly age 37. So his heart was functioning biologically at half of his chronological age.
Wow. That's great. Is he still competing?
Yeah, he just did a competition. I saw him the past 2 weeks.
Man, that's amazing. And I know you've done some research on the eyes, and you're solving all kinds of really complex problems with these B cells. And I just love how you bring them to life with the music. I mean, that talk about poetry right there. That's amazing.
Right. And our metaphor with the laser part of awakening them is we are singing the song of the stem cells in life.
It's great. Yeah.
To awaken and then to guide them, to give them a homing signal.
Got it. Wow. Because I mean, that's what they're there for. They're there to signal new cell differentiation, new cell growth, and you're helping them bring them right into fruition. Because for when were B cells first identified in the
2000,
human?
I think they're first identified in mice in 2006, and then in people within 1 to 2 years of that.
Okay. Yeah, and so you know, you're the first person that I know of that has actually brought them to life. Is there anybody else that you know of that's had as groundbreaking of work on these B cells as you?
There have been other practitioners using a method that they call cold shock, and it was described to me as cooling the cells to 4 degrees centigrade for 12 hours, and they have gotten some activation effect. Yet it doesn't seem to be as robust as what we're doing with the song laser.
Okay, man. Well, this is fascinating. And if you just had to kind of put a glimpse into the future as far as what you'd like to have happen with age medicine, what are some of your predictions of what will happen with biology over the next 10 years?
With the orientation that the biohack is the stack, the core idea is identifying the best of all modalities for what they do. And we may certainly evolve the art of what we're doing with the V cells. I expect that to become an enhanced version of itself over time. In addition to that, almost every week, I'm learning about another technology or modality or biochemical principle where, for given areas, results can be made even better. And as we put all these pieces together, it's really the idea of creating very best protocols. If we take the best of all the ideas now and create what we would call our gold standard of very best protocols, then we would be at a start point to innovate on those. So I believe there's going to be a lot of development. There's so many great ideas out there, so many new nutraceuticals. There's a lot of evolution in the peptide science world. There's a lot happening in the pulse DMF technology world and light therapy world and sound therapy world that I believe over 10 years that when we put these very best stacks together, we'll get regenerative results, human performance results, and optimization of human potential results that we haven't seen before. And the real question is, what is our true human potential? And if aging has been a limiting factor, what happens if we reverse biologic age and allow someone to relive those biological years? And then they created discipline, diet, lifestyle, exercise, and all the other practices that can be done, then a person could become an enhanced version of themselves and they could do it again. So it's really how far can we go individually and collectively with what we're really capable of.
Man, well, that sounds beautiful, and I couldn't agree more. I think this coalescing of all these medical technologies, things that we haven't really been able to measure, we can now measure. We're seeing incredible breakthroughs. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, and appreciate you taking the time to be on the show and share your insights with our audience here. Any final words that you'd like to share? Anything I may have overlooked and should have asked you that I didn't?
Always an excellent question. And probably the biggest take-home message is that we are working to overcome what has been perceived limitations. And if we overcome limitation that has been aging, then really think of what's possible. And it might be a little bit of a long answer. You met him actually at the conference, Dan Sullivan. He's got a book called My Plan on Living to 156.
Yep.
And he's created profound transformations of people's lives just doing a simple process where he asks them how long they think they live. They give a number. He takes them to a year before and then asks a few questions. They realize that maybe they can live 15 or 20 years longer. And just that understanding that they can have more time is transformative. So the realization that there can be more time, and then a personal decision is, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think that's exciting. And Dan's been on the podcast several times, been a mentor of mine, but isn't that crazy once you start thinking of that? And now our job, you and I, our job is to fill in the gap and saying, okay, well, Dan wants to live to be 156. He turns 80 in a couple months. And so it's like, All right, we got our work cut out for us, don't we?
Right, we do. We, we can assist him to his goal. And we should start now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, man, that's a beautiful thought process there. And I'd encourage each one of you to look at where you're at in life now and say, okay, if you've got these great longevity goals, you can't get there by coming in with, it's like bringing your car to the mechanic when everything's broken and you want the whole thing, you want the engine overhauled, you want new tires, new struts, new seats, all those things. It's like, take care of those little things as you go, and you'll be shocked at how much healthier you can be. So, man, Todd, this is amazing. And the best way to reach you is your website, drtoddo.com. And then even on Instagram, you guys can reach out to Dr. Todd Ovokaitys at Dr. Todd O. Any other places where people can find you, or anything they'll find on your website?
Well, I actually have a LinkedIn for the first time with my new great media person. And before long, I may have TikTok too, but that's not ready to go yet.
Cool.
So the best would be the website, and there's information there, a free book to download about growing younger. And then the Instagram is that style. And they're both Dr. Todd O to keep it simple.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate your time today. And for everybody, if you love the show, make sure you share it with your friends, family, loved ones. Check out Dr. Todd Ovokaitys at the breakthrough work he's doing at Dr. Todd O. And I will see you on the next show. Thanks, everybody.